Welcome, everyone. It's so great to see you here. Appreciate you being here to kick off the morning with me. I'm going to share my screen over here and we'll take it away. As we heard, how do you feel about EQ and U? That's what we're here to talk about today. So where I want to start, I would start by saying that people often overrate intensity and underrate consistency. What impacts our daily lives the most are the small things that we're doing every single day. These are the things that we do behind the scenes that no one applauds us for. It's the things like showing up, like being here today. And I sincerely thank you for that. It's having self-belief. It's pushing through the doubt. And all of those things help get you closer to the life that you're envisioning. And so hopefully today we can start diving into some exciting and small, what I kind of like to call life hacks that I discovered in some of my education and background that I'm really excited to share with you today. I think that what I have learned has kind of a pervasive effect on all areas of my life. And as you heard from the introduction, I'm doing quite a lot of disparate, different things at any given time. And this is one of those threads that has really run the course between all of these different projects and creative endeavors, you could say, that I'm engaging in. And so excited to share a bit of those thoughts and learnings with you today. And I'll preface in the first slide, I am live from New York. So that means maybe we'll hear some sirens or taxis or cars out the windows. So if that happens, I might mute myself once or twice, but just letting you know off the bat. All right, so let's start out with what presenters might not ask you to do, which is usually we say, hey, please put your phones away. We want you to pay attention. If you can right now, if you got your phone next to you or you got your messaging app on your computer, I'd like you to take a look at your top emojis. Pull up your texting keyboard and pull up your emoji screen. So why are we going to do this? Effective communications is really one of the cornerstones of practicing and improving emotional intelligence, not just effectively communicating with others, but with ourselves too. So this is a simple exercise that we're going to do to reflect on a very daily mode of communication that we're all regularly using. So taking a look at your emoji keyboard, you can see on the screen, I've highlighted the emojis in the top left corner. Usually in the keyboards, this is where your most frequent emojis will show up. Take a look at those emojis. Are they ones that you want to be perceived as feeling, as communicating to others? Do they match how you've been feeling lately? What are those emojis saying about you? So this is a very simple self-awareness exercise. This is what it looks like to start building emotional intelligence. Some of these little daily check-ins. This is data right at our fingertips. We can plug in, take a look, every few weeks, seeing, are we authentically communicating how we're feeling and how we want to be seen? A tornado, right? Yeah, that's swirling dervish. Just a quick little check-in. Let's dive into what we're here to do today. So I've broken our session into 3 parts. First part, we're going to get some common definition, common basis of what is EQ. Like I said, you heard that I'm doing quite a lot of different disparate projects at any given time. And I found that really the thread of the language and kind of the why of EQ has kind of spurred me to embrace it in various different projects, different settings I find myself in any day. Next up, we're going to look at the EQ domains in U. So we're going to start to explore the 4 main domains of emotional intelligence, naming them and starting to understand how progressively we build upon them. And then thirdly, in the EQ domains in U section, we are going to do a team builder. So give you a little more knowledge about your own EQ as we'll try and intersperse throughout the presentation today. And then what's next? After you see what an EQ team builder looks like, I'm going to give you some more tools and suggestions for how do you go from here on to start thinking about emotional intelligence, start thinking about how you're building that. So think of me like a coach, a cooking show host. I'm going to give you some ingredients, some proven resources to implement. Then when it comes to personal improvement from here on, it'll really be up to you to choose what, how much of this you want to keep learning and keep practicing. And depending on what you choose to do, that'll also depend on how I can support you past this session. So I will, of course, give you some information at the end to how we can keep the conversation going. And it all really comes down to asking yourself why. At the end of the day, you're going to hear me say this a number of times. It starts with the why. Why do you want to learn about emotional intelligence? Why are you striving to be a better leader? Keep asking why. Keep chasing that why. It all comes down to the why. All right, so part one, what is EQ? Well, for starters, Jason, you keep saying these two letters EQ, and I can see that emotional intelligence is actually E and I for the letters. Well, if we're Nelly fans, we might know the song EI, but often we hear EQ referred to because we like to often compare IQ and EQ. So it's a colloquial term. EQ is often what you'll hear when people talking about that is often in comparison to IQ. So basic definition that I've shared here on the screen, we pull off entrepreneur.com. So in the definition, we see that emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions. So that's the first part. That starts with the self. And then we move to handling interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. That then moves into the interpersonal, the connection with someone else. So even in our definition, we can see that there are really two key sections of emotional intelligence, the self and then the other, if you will. And where this is all going, or what we're all looking at this is, here's a snapshot from a reference we'll use a little later on. But we like to take a look at emotional intelligence as building a foundation. You can see that self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, and relationship management are all the roots of this tree here. So focusing on these domains, working on building and improving these domains is what's going to help us bloom these great branches and flowers that you're seeing up in the tree. And no surprise that in a space like this, at the Now conference, we're looking at upskilling, reskilling, thriving. These things we're seeing in the leaves here often correlate directly to competencies of excellence at work for all of us in any of our positions. And really, most importantly, we take it a level higher. This is the stuff of quality leaders. This is what we're hoping for, what we're looking for, and that the leaders that inspire us, the leaders that pull us in the most, make us feel the most welcome. Those are the leaders who are employing these things and practicing them very well. Thanks, folks, for the shout out on the Zoom bar. I do see the chat here, so I'm kind of keying in and out here. So yes, please continue chatting, conversating in the chat. Throw questions in there. If we don't get to them in real time, I'll definitely follow up and get to them afterwards. So this is a group thing. I appreciate us looking out for each other. Okay? So what we're doing here, practice emotional intelligence. So like we saw in that previous slide, there are 4 EQ domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Now, the key here with these domains is that they're progressive. So you see on the slide that they're numbered. These are, in this case, actually showing that, that there is a starting point and there's, working up, that really each of these domains adds something on from the previous one, you could say. And so in that regard, we are, much like we saw in the definition, starting with the self. You got to get right with yourself before you can get right with others. A little more context on the high level of emotions and this notion that the mind and the body are separate. I like this chart because it shows that really the mind and the body are not separate. That notion is simply false. Our nervous system bridges them both. They communicate in both directions to direct our states. So our states include emotions, but are a larger umbrella for emotional responses that include bodily responses too. So our emotions affect us physiologically. So what you're looking here on this slide is a heat map from a study they described in the book, The Neuroscience of Emotion by Adolphs and Anderson. They're from Caltech. And what they found in the study is that people vary in how they express emotions verbally, quite often, but the body representations are relatively stereotyped. So what that's saying is that we're sophisticated animals, but we're still animals, and these maps are established by our genome, modified by experience, but nonetheless, they're relatively hardwired. So for us, what does that mean? What does that let us think about? Learning to recognize your bodily responses to different mental states is powerful. And I see some of you doing that in the chat already, right? This is powerful just to look at the heat maps and see where and how our bodies are affected by different emotions. A little more about emotional intelligence. Emotions are contagious. We catch them, we spread them. Kind of like we're seeing somewhat in that last slide, we have a bodily response, but not only that, sometimes that response is contagious. Other people can pick it up. So all of us Californians kind of know this as vibes. That's usually the word we refer to it as, but the scientific term is limbic resonance. That's actually our nervous system feeling other people's emotions. So I want you to think about a recent time when you entered a room, be it at work, be it at home, be it a public space, and you felt the room, that you had come in with a certain emotion and switched emotions. Think about a time that happened recently. Could you feel it without hearing anything verbal?
No, because everything's terrible.
Could you know what the other people or the other person in the room were feeling without having said anything? So, right, that's limbic resonance. That is one of those contagious moments, for folks who have roommates or partners, and you're around those people quite a lot. I know for me that if I have a close friend or roommate come over after work, I can often tell how their day went before they said anything. The way they enter the room, just kind of their feeling in their body, it definitely can affect me too. And that's important for me to know, is that others' emotions can affect me whether or not I was ready for it. So as we see, understanding and recognizing our bodily responses to emotions, that's giving us information to be aware of what we're feeling, and then giving us some of those skills to start managing it. So that's self-awareness and self-management. So course of our lives often depends on EQ, whether we like it or not. Emotions affect our health, our relationships, our financial well-being. And, even further, often how we're responding to other people and the events in our lives, that's a reflection of us. And then it often determines how people respond to us. So if you're having a bad day and you're not usually a person having a bad day, people might respond a very certain way to that. And so, it's not only we're being affected by, other people and events, but then in turn, it's the kind of recursive circle that then our effect on the other folks is then again affecting in a circle. So that's important to acknowledge here, that an important part of why we're here, that really, the course of our lives depends on this stuff. So let's get ahead of it. Let's get a handle on it. And that is the most exciting part, I think, of why I've embraced this concept, and why I'm excited to share it out with folks, is that EQ can be learned. IQ are the brains you're born with, but EQ can actually be learned. The brain changes through a process called plasticity. And this happens as we're doing those small EQ practices, looking at new EQ strategies. Taking a look at your emojis in that first slide, that's actually causing the brain to form new connections. And so like we said, there are 4 progressive domains of EQ. Start with the self, move to the others. And you're saying, okay, that's great. I get it. I got a little bit about it. So what's in it for me? Why does it matter? Well, studies have shown us that EQ is actually twice as important as IQ in getting where you want to go in life. EQ is responsible for over 60% of your job performance. Not only that, but 90% of top professionals across industries have high EQ. To say it another very simple way, people don't really like to work with jackasses. That's something, I think we could say kind of across the board, is that working with difficult people, working with people that there's lots of tension, it doesn't feel good. It's not an environment that you want to be part of. So not surprisingly, those of us who work and practice our EQ skills are going to have a much more chance at being more highly successful in where we want to go as leaders, as managers. And like I said, unlike IQ, you can measure and improve your EQ. So we're going to get a starting point with measuring our EQ, and then we're going to be able to find strategies and ways to continue improving it. And then we can always measure again. And the greatest thing is that there are continually new strategies popping up, all different sorts of resources for how to practice and improve your EQ domains. So a quick anecdote. why I'm excited, why I'm passionate to share some of this work, or how it's come to be in some of my professional work. So I first encountered emotional intelligence in an MBA course I took back in middle of the 2010s. And it was language. It was this new way of seeing things. It was, as someone who loves the details of words and is always looking, as a lifelong learner, hungry for new ways to describe and explain my experience, the lived experience of those around me. I encountered this book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and that really gave me the keys to start working on my own EQ. And then as I started to matriculate into consulting and helping others with their projects, I was able to use those strategies in what I would have thought at the time was some unlikely places. And so what does that look like for me when you're seeing what this slide is? A little bit of my background. So I believe I have the skills and tools in my toolkit to help leave it better than I found it. So whether that's people I meet and lead on a given day, the artist or tour I'm helping be greener, the entertainment industry I'm serving, business students, student leaders in general, or even larger than natural environment in whole, I'll leave it better than I found it. And so in this capacity and some of my social impact consulting, the work I've been doing combines all of these layers. The job as a consultant is to manage ideas and stakeholders to make a positive impact. The environment I'm working in these situations, you can see there are a lot of people in this picture in large scale event planning and large scale events. The environment is full of distractions. So this specific tour that I was on, in a row of shows, one after the other, we had a van stolen, we had a lockdown because of a riot, there was an HPV outbreak, and then we ended with an earthquake in Mexico City. So talk about distractions and things weighing on the emotion of really trying to install and pilot something new and different. And so in this case, what I was doing, I was helping U2 and Live Nation work on zero wasting. So how do we reduce single-use plastic? That is a large-scale operational change. So talking about people changes, talking about operational task project, actual iterations of literal movements of people. You're changing how they're doing things. And so there's a lot that goes into that when you're starting to talk about changing people's jobs who've been doing this for a very long time. And so in this capacity, I'm working with a large stakeholder mix, working with the C-suite through seasonal, neurologically diverse staff. So that for me, would need to code switch quite often. And so this was a test of, going from one room to the other, needing to train people, needing to also pitch and talk about strategic KPIs in one given day. And so for me, that code switching piece I found was key. And I was using emotional intelligence strategies as part of that, related to social awareness, especially. And then I found, after doing kind of the high level C-suite work, talking to the boss's boss's boss, sitting down with the band members of a band like U2 who are invested and actually care about this work, that's a different rapport. That's a different sort of setting than when I need to put on a different hat and step into a room and train 100 people in 30 minutes to completely do their job differently and let them know, hey, there's 65,000 people waiting outside that gate. You got to get this right in about 10 minutes or less to have a good seamless experience. And I know you don't care, but this whole project, this whole company rests on us proving this correct. So high stress, a lot of stakes there. And the solution I found for getting across the key messages to seasonal staff was an activity that came from the emotional intelligence book. It was an active listening idea where, when talking to the staff members, me and two of my team members would all be watching very closely when I would make a joke about checking my watch. As it feels like I've been here for 16 hours already. And we saw the staff members who could see and make light of that I wasn't actually wearing a watch, the bracelet I'm wearing right here, would kind of smile or smirk, give us a little nod with their eyes. We knew those staff were probably going to be more successful off the bat. And what that meant is that my team and I would identify the folks who were not paying attention, not making eye contact, usually not, showing that some sort of engagement, kind of my bad dad joke. And in that case, we knew those were going to be the concession stands that we would visit first in this full stadium size arena to help support them and give them extra support because they likely hadn't heard the instructions. And so just this very little looking at my watch, active listening strategy helped us do something like this, removing a huge amount of plastic waste from entering landfills. And that was one, of course, key learning for me, was seeing, I can use some of these strategies in very big, impactful ways, beyond just what I'm doing. And it also really gave me insight into what I would say, kind of is my first big learning about emotional intelligence. And that is that as you continue to grow as leaders, it's going to become very important for you to pass along information to multiple stakeholders who might require different approaches for effectively completing what they need to complete. So as you continue to grow as leaders, the people that you serve, the people that you lead, different groups of them are going to require you to show up differently. And that was an important realization for me to see that, okay, I need to think about that consciously entering spaces. How do I show up? How do I best serve that group? Talking to the VP of sales or the VP of operations at a stadium, he has very different, ideas in mind of what success looks like, than talking to the head of staff personnel of all seasonal staff and what their idea of success looks like. And so for me, I needed to understand and meet those people where they are. So that's the one story I like to share about some of the work I've done and how I've actually, using data, seen some of these strategies we're talking about have an effective outcome. So with that, let's move to part 2. So EQ domains and you. We're going to go through each of the 4 domains. I'll give you a little more insight into what each of them look like, and then also throw a few tools and tips along the way that you might want to use or reference again. The slides are all available online, so you can jump on. You'll have PDFs of these, especially for things you might want to fill out or look back at. So our first EQ domain, self-awareness. Heard me say it, now let's define it. So self-awareness is the recognition of our emotions, how they affect our thoughts and behavior. We understand that we have emotions and they have an effect on us. That chart we saw, that body heat map earlier, that literally shows and proves this definition, if you will. And so what does that look like? How do we start to think about, what emotions affect our thoughts and behaviors? Well, when I'm talking to leaders, especially in our business student leaders, I'm really very consciously talking about values-based leadership. You need to start with your uncompromisables. What are those things across situations, across companies, across positions that aren't going to change for you, that you believe and holds deeply true? Those are the things often that's another word we often hear for, triggers. That's something, for me is that I believe that everyone should have fair, equitable access to things like my leadership development workshops. So, to find out if there was an instance where that was not the case, or that, a paywall had been put up or something like that for a certain group, I know that would cause a very visceral emotional response to me, and that I would have thoughts and feelings right away about that. I can even incite myself over here and, kind of getting clenched up a little, like that's not okay. So us understanding some of those things that we value and will hold true and are important to us, no matter the situations, are uncompromisables. That's where we start with self-awareness. How do you do that? What does that look like? So there's the VIA character strengths assessment. Character strengths are part of your personality that make you feel authentic and engaged. And taking the VIA character strengths assessment, it's free online, VIA character assessment. That's going to give you an idea, an understanding of how you can apply this different strengths and character strengths to help you do things like boost confidence, strengthen your relationships, manage problems, improve work performance, build meaning and purpose. All kind of these things we're swirling around here today in this space and at the NOW conference. And so that's the VIA character strengths. Strengths Finder, that's another assessment tool. So Strengths Finder is a personal development tool developed by Gallup. It provides an individual your top 5 strengths. So what are your top 5 strengths? You maybe have heard folks ask this before. So focusing on your strengths, they talk about in the Strengths Finder model on a daily basis has been shown to have profound positive effects on your personal and professional well-being. This is a tool, Strengths Finder, that I implement often with our students. It's great across teams as well, that each of you can share your top 5 strengths and you start to see alignment. There's some great frameworks that'll show you gaps in areas where your team might not have as many strengths in different domains. This as an individual, my top 5 strengths are on my LinkedIn page. When people talk to me and they say, in an interview, what are your strengths? For me to come out and say, I am an arranger, I'm a maximizer, I'm a communicator. So it gives you very literally some better ways to tell your story, better ways to talk about the things that you do and are good at in kind of less tired language. So that's Strengths Finder. Strengths Finder is a book that comes with a code to do the assessment. It's unfortunately not free, so there is a cost to the Strengths Finder. But I know online that you can often find discount codes at most of your book retailers for it. So that's Strengths Finder. And then the one I haven't shared here that's a bit more experiential, if you reach out afterwards, I'd be happy to share it via PDF, but is a values bracket I've created. And so this is looks like a March Madness bracket of 64 different values. It's going to give you an idea of some of the things that you might believe or are grounded deeply in your being. And it's going to have you kind of March Madness style break it down to try and get what your top value or top couple values are. So that's a tool that I developed with some former colleagues that I find is quite useful with students, but that's something that is also is personal, so it's not quite available widely out there. Building self-awareness. This is potentially a framework that we've encountered in other places, the Johari window. When we talk about emotional intelligence, when we're talking about self-awareness, that orange block in the top right of this slide, the blind spot, that's what we're really trying to get at. Or, continuing to find information about us that we don't know, but others might know. And so that's kind of that point of the self-awareness, is looking at, where do we fall in different situations with our own self-awareness? The bigger your windows are on the left side of the pane, the more self-aware you are. So that known to self column makes sense you be more self-aware, the more that's known to you. So one last piece on self-awareness as a plug for creativity. One of the best places to actually help you identify and label your emotions, arts and entertainment. Look at books, music, movies, television for references. Finding your emotions in the expressions of artists allows you to learn about yourself and discover feelings that are often hard to communicate. I know when I find that song that just hits, that right mix of like sweet pop backbeat with melancholy lyrics, that gets me sometimes. That's yeah. And for me, who currently in New York, but having lived in New York for a while, there was really this kind of, it fit the vibe when I was living here for me, and that helped me really kind of understand this deeper level. What am I feeling as what kind of felt like a fish out of water in a way for a while. So look to the artists. That is a great place to find other, representative examples of what you're feeling. Talk about me being as a kid, the mixtapes I made, the mix CDs, I was in the fields. So arts and entertainment has always been that place for me to learn more about self-awareness. I lied. One more self-awareness tool. So this would be a good one to jump on the slides and pull out afterwards in the PDF. So this is a user manual. This is something that I was thankful entering my role at Haas, my supervisor and I sat down and did. So for me, this is one of those where I just got a new vacuum cleaner about a week ago, and it came with a 75-page user manual. I like to think that we as humans are a bit more complex than vacuum cleaners, but with that said, let's start small for today and work on a 1-page user manual for work, projects, side hustles, whatever that looks like. This is something that after the presentation, go back, pull out. It would be great to bring into your next role. It would be great, onboarding a new team member. These are things that are really helpful to start, thinking yourself, I need to call out these things. Am I aware of all these things? Can I answer these things effectively? A great tool to take into this. And so after completing your list, think about how you might sort your answers on some of these columns into objective physical or subjective emotional. So in taking a look at your user manual, try and identify the things that are emotional. So for me, taking a look at conditions I like to work in, I want an ergonomic chair that's very comfortable for me. I have long legs, so I want it to be the right height. So that's an objective physical condition I need to work in. A subjective emotional condition I might want to work in is a non-hostile work environment. I like people and teammates that make me feel welcome. I also, like to smile and interact, hear how my team members are doing. So I know for me, there's certain kind of conditions related to positive emotional states that I want to work in. So this is a good tool for us to start pulling out what are the objective things we need to do good work? What are those emotional or subjective things? Keying in on the subjective emotional things is really going to help us use that information powerfully moving forward. We're going to start to see, cause and effect. And again, this kind of goes back to that story I shared with you too, is that leaders need to be aware of how they show up in different spaces. Others are counting on you, others are looking to you. So it's hard to show up and lead when you don't feel like it. That is one of the hardest conversations I continue to have this past year with our student leaders is, how do I show up and lead when I don't feel like it? And so I've been really conscious of this. For me, even, meeting with different groups of student leaders, meeting with different folks during a given time and day, I need to understand very literally the different times of days I might be meeting with people. I need to understand my triggers, what pushes my buttons, all in the hopes of me bringing congruent emotions into those meetings. Because if I'm treating different groups differently, there's incongruence, and that leads to different experience for our different leaders, for our different teammates. And so that's an important piece for me in helping me show up in a space, consciously trying to be authentically myself. Okay, so moving on to domain number 2, self-management. All right, so once we're starting to understand our emotions, now we want to look at how we can control those feelings and behaviors. How do we manage our emotions in healthy ways? And talk about this ringing true for, however many, past 3 years or however long. How do we adapt to changing circumstances with our emotions? That is something huge, especially now. How do we manage our emotions when every week something new is thrown at us in the world, much less at home, much less at work, much less in the cities we live? So this is that second domain. Once we're aware of our emotions, now we need to start thinking about how we manage them. Here's a tool for what that looks like. This is a great piece I found on Instagram. And this is a visual representation of starting with naming your emotions, identifying the cause. Back to what we saw on that last slide, there's a cause and effect. I understand the emotion, I understand what caused it. Now, okay, these are the behaviors and thoughts that come with it. Okay, I feel myself getting sweaty. I see my fist clenching up. I'm starting to think angry thoughts about this person that actually has nothing to do with arguing about a work project, not the person. Okay, and you see already in there, I'm starting to challenge that emotion. Okay, this actually has more to do with the project and attention there than the person. Let's think about that. So this is a nice little framework of seeing how you might work through or manage an emotion. And why I like this activity, this is one that you can take offline and think about stressful situations. Think about triggering situations where you understand yourself getting, kind of very emotional, something's triggering a response. This is a good activity to walk through this framework with that emotion, because our brains have a hard time distinguishing between what we see with our eyes and what we visualize in our minds. So in fact, in MRI scans of people's brains, when you take them while they're watching the sunset, and then when you ask them later on to think about visualizing that sunset, the MRI brain scans are pretty much the same. So visualizing yourself managing your emotions and your behaviors effectively is a great way to practice some of these skills we're talking about and turn them into habits. So for this to work, I might recommend doing this visualization of this thinking in a room that's free from distractions. The goal is to immerse yourself and get into your head. A really great time to do this right before you go to bed at night. All right, moving right along, we've crossed that yellow line. Now we're moving into the social. EQ domain 3. So this is understanding the needs, emotions, and concerns of others. So now we know we have emotions. Guess what? Everyone else is doing the same self-awareness, self-management thing too. Now, how do I translate that to picking up on what others are doing? Picking up on emotional cues, feeling comfortable socially, and recognizing power dynamics. Power dynamics, of course, comes into this space when we're talking about work, when we're talking about looking at how are we upskilling, how are we looking to get into new rooms, work with new colleagues, learn from new leaders. That comes into play with power dynamics and starting to navigate those two situations. Two components of social awareness, listening and observing. Two most important and really only two components of social awareness I want to highlight. Listening and observing. We hear it a lot, we see it a lot, but it takes a lot of practice. You got to channel your inner anthropologist up close and in the middle of it all unfolding. And so I found a great little video I'm going to play you here, as I think this is a great way to talk about social awareness. So let's see how this goes.
My whole life. Both.
Start it over for you. Here we go.
I've been in love with music my whole life, both as a musician and as a listener. I now listen to a much wider range of music than I used to. When I was younger, I used to actually pride myself on my music snobbery. But nowadays, it just feels like I'm potentially cutting myself off from hearing some great ideas. And I think that's a prerequisite when it comes to listening to people too. You have to go into it open-minded and curious and ready to learn something new. Also, the instinct to multitask is so hard to turn off, but it's so important that you do it. You know, when you're listening to music these days, most of the time, it's something that we do passively. It's in the background. It's the soundtrack to something else that we're doing. And I hate to say it, but between our phones and our smartwatches and just our own wandering thoughts, it's easy to get distracted, and we tend to listen to other people that way too. Imagine trying to listen to a song while singing a different song in your head. You can't do it, or you can't do it well, and you can't fully appreciate what someone else is saying if you're thinking about something else. I'm also a big believer in the power of nonverbal communication. Like, just a simple act of a nod is a way to let the other person know that you're engaged, and also invites them to keep going and say more. That kind of intentional, engaged silence makes space for them. That also means turning off the instinct to talk about yourself. I used to think that this was actually the best way to show that I was really listening. Someone would tell me something and I'd say, oh man, you know, that reminds me of this thing that happened to me. And then I would tell a whole story of my own. But it's kind of like listening to half a song and then saying, oh, you know, this part reminds me of this other song, and then turning that first song off and going and putting on some other song, which is also something I've done. But you can't get deeper if you lose the moment like that. So it's a challenge to your impatience and to your selfishness to be engaged without making it about you. Every conversation has the potential to open up and reveal all the layers and layers within it, all those rooms within rooms. And personally, I hope that I can keep looking for those ways in so I can experience the depth and the richness of someone else's ideas every chance I get to hear them.
Okay, great video, yeah, right. So this is a part of a longer TED Talk. I think it's about 40 minutes, but if you just look up Silence Exploder TED Talk, probably the easiest way to find it. So give it a listen, but powerful stuff there. Imagine trying to listen to a song while singing a different song in your head. Effective communication is one of the cornerstones of practicing and improving emotional intelligence. I think the second time I've said that. Effective communication is one of the cornerstones of practicing and improving emotional intelligence. So let's do another EQ builder. How about? I'm going to do is show you 5 different pictures of people's faces like this. And there's going to be, we'll start it in a second, but there's going to be four different emotions around that person's face. I'll actually do this one together and we'll do the next few. So you're going to see these 4 different emotions around people's eyes. And I want you as quick as possible for these next few. You don't need to write it in the chat or anything. I'll let you know what the answer is, but I want you to identify what emotion they're showing you. So I'm going to show you a picture of just the eyes. Choose what emotion they're showing you. Try to do it as quick as possible. Don't think too much into it, and then see if you're right. Okay. So with this one, what do we think? Panicked. Yes. So panicked. That's the first one. Very good. Okay. So the next few will go kind of quick. You get to take a look for about 3 seconds. I'll tell you the answer. This is part of a much larger version of this study. You can find it via the New York Times. There's probably like 30 or 40 images. And just FYI, I mean, these are all kind of grainy old images, yet this still works pretty far by and large. So let's see how it works for you. All right. Next up, what emotion is this person conveying? About 5 more seconds and I'll tell you. All right, this one is playful. Yeah, there we go. So this is about saying playful. Okay, ready for the next one? Here's our next one. What emotion is this person conveying? Yeah, I see it coming in on the chat. Upset, very good. All right, next one, here we go. What emotion is this person conveying? Desire. Yep, that one was quite quick. Got one more. Okay, here we go. What emotion is this person conveying? Accusing. Yep, so this last one is accusing. Great work, everyone. Most folks were on it just like that. So as you walk away from this, couple questions to think about. You can answer yourself right now. I'll ask you. Feel free if you want to throw something in the chat. We'll go kind of quick though, but so don't feel like you need to type anything. Which ways of knowing are primarily involved in determining your answers? So what were you doing to determine your answers? What were the ways of knowing? Kind of a second question to that. Are you more likely to be correct if you respond to these questions intuitively or through careful deliberation? Kind of gave you the answer to that one at the start, but thinking about it, are you more likely to be correct when you're using your intuition or careful deliberation? Last question I'll go with. So if you do well on this test, do you think that means that you're pretty good at reading people's emotions in a meaningful, real life way? I mean, there's something there. We're literally looking at just black and white snapshot of people's eyes, and we had pretty much 100% accuracy rate across the board. So might be something to that. If you want to take this test or dive into it deeper and have your actual score measured of like all 30 faces, jump on the New York Times and you can type in any sort of, or in Google, you type New York Times eye test, social awareness test. This will come up. It's been duplicated in a number of spots. You can also find it linked in the presentation. All right, EQ domain 4. I'm going to talk just a little bit about this, and then we're going to do a team builder that talks about social awareness and relationship management. So the 4th most progressive EQ domain is relationship management. So this is our ability to develop and maintain good relationships, communicate clearly, influence others, and manage conflict. All things that we're going to need to do as excellent leaders. All things that we're often tasked with doing in our various roles on and off campus already. And this is, in the progressive domains, this is the highest level stuff. This is not easy. I mean, oftentimes we're doing it to varying degrees every single moment of the day, it feels like, but it doesn't necessarily make it easy. So what are some of our relationship management competencies? This will show you what it looks like when we're practicing good relationship management, when we've started to improve that domain of our EQ. This is some of the stuff that it leads to. And people who manage relationships, who are able to see the benefit of connecting with many different people, even those that they are not fond of. So solid relationships are something that should be sought and cherished. They are the result of how you understand people, how you trust them, and the history you share. So not surprisingly, the weaker the connection you have with someone, the harder it is to get your point across. If you want people to listen, you have to practice relationship management and seek benefits from every relationship, especially the challenging ones. Got to remind ourselves we have to seek benefit from every relationship, even the challenging ones. The difference between an interaction and a relationship is a matter of frequency. It's a product of the quality, depth, and time you spend interacting with that person. So that's defining something we kind of know, that your good friends are your good friends because the depth, the frequency, the quality of the time you've invested in getting to know them better, getting to know them more intimately. So, you're on one end, you have kind of these just one-off interactions, and you over here have a real true relationship. And so often in higher ed, especially, our work when we're student facing often can feel transactional. Sometimes students just need the thing, there is really a transactional piece, but as educators, as higher ed practitioners, there's also a learning moment. And, it's a real fine spectrum we can often walk in higher ed. And I recognize that as, just transactional interactions, a deep, meaningful relationship that leads to positive outcomes. Hashtag empathy. Here's a plug for empathy. And, we know empathy has always been a critical skill for leaders, but it's taking on a new level of meaning and priority, especially in the last 3 years. Far from a soft approach, it actually drives significant business results. So recent research has shown that it's actually really important from everything from innovation to retention. As practitioners, great leadership requires a fine mix of all kinds of skills to create the conditions for engagement, happiness, and performance. And in studies, empathy continues to top the list of what leaders must get right. There's a lot of positive outcomes in practicing empathy and showing that to your team. So in coaching students on event planning, project management, leadership development, a good amount of previous years in higher ed have been spent in various functions doing some of that work. And when I was doing that work, I identified 3 interesting areas of friction, which you're seeing on the screen. And I made an enlightening discovery. Sleep, stress, group projects. These were 3 areas of friction. And what I learned in this moment is that we do a good job talking about what to learn in college. We don't do a good job talking about how to learn. We do a good job talking about what to learn. We don't often do a good job talking about how to learn. And guess what? That doesn't really change that much after college, unless an empowered leader is conscious of this and is starting to provide solutions. And that's why I'm glad you're here today, to start thinking about this, to start thinking about, how can I engage others that I work with, others that I might lead, into helping them understand, how to approach a new task, how to approach, learning in a new sort of way. And so what I found when working with students in event planning and in project management, then saying, I got this, it's good, don't worry, Jason, the greatest, biggest concert you've ever seen. I found that as time grew closer and closer, sleep went down to the big project, stress went up. And in generally talking about working with others, talking about working with the group, nope, I got to do it my own. I can't trust my team members. I'll just take on more. And there's a really deep insight in this, in that relationship management poses the greatest challenge for most people during times of stress. So that's that inherent feeling of us as leaders to say, I'll just do it. Let me take on more. Let me just do it. I can't trust, my team. And that's because often we're feeling stress, and that's really posing challenges on our relationship management. And so knowing how important that is, I want us to do a team builder together. This is a team builder to take a look at how we approach teamwork. This is a team builder that I will acknowledge it's been designed most functionally to be performed experientially, But we're going to take a little twist on it here today. Though I share that now, is that this is something, a tool, a team builder you can find online with instructions to print out the content and materials you need and lead it with your team, lead it with your students, lead it with your colleagues. The tools are there and you can actually do it experientially. But for today, we're going to do a little bit modified version. So let's see how that goes. So what we have in front of us today is the Compass Points Team Builder. So some of you might have heard of Myers-Briggs inventory. This is kind of an abbreviated version of that work with a specific focus on the group piece. So the goal of the Compass Points activity is to explore your various preferences that individuals use to approach group learning and teamwork. This activity helps us understand the strengths and limitations of each preference. And as you do your activity, start to think about, how do we utilize this knowledge to enhance the ways we work together? Thinking as you're doing this, how do we utilize what we're learning here to enhance the ways we work together? That's the goal of this activity. As you see these next slides come up, what I'm going to say to you is that everyone has some characteristics from the 4 different slides I'll show you, but one of them is going to capture the essence of your personality more accurately than the others. That is your dominant type. No one type is better than the others. They're all just different. And so what we're going to do here is I am going to show you 4 different slides, directional slides, so compass points, north, south, east, and west. I'd like you to choose one of them as the one that most describes the way that you show up in group work. Then I'm going to post questions, 5 questions to answer, and we're going to quickly throw you into partnered up breakout rooms to talk about your answers. This is just a quick, brief interaction with someone else at random in the room. You got to hear me talk quite a lot. So I want to give you a couple minutes after you choose your compass point to discuss your thoughts to the questions I'm going to pose with another person. Now, usually if we were all together in person, we'd divide it by each of our compass points and have a group share out. But for today, I just want to give us a little interaction with someone else you might not have met. So quickly introduce yourself and then share a couple thoughts on the answers. We'll bring you back to the breakout rooms. We'll bring you back from the breakout rooms, and then I'll give you part 3 of what's next. I'll get you onto your next session. So with that, I'm going to show you 4 compass points. We'll go through the slides twice. Choose the one that most accurately you feel captures the essence of your personality more than the others. And then I'm going to throw 5 questions up on the screen. Think about those questions, your answers to them. And at that point, you're going to be thrown out into breakout rooms to talk for about 2 minutes with each other, okay? Okay. All right. So first one. North, okay? Here's our second one. Which type are you? Here's our third one, east. And when we go back through this next time, I'll also read out the descriptions of each of them. And here's west. Which type were you of those 4? Did one immediately jump out? Not sure? That's all right. We're going to go back through one more time. And if you aren't sure after that time, an easy way is to pick the one that you're least like. So if you're saying I'm least like speculating, then very likely the opposite of that, west or east, is going to be the one that you are. So let's go back through one more time. And I want you to choose the compass point that most describes the essence of your personality. So first we got north, acting. Let's do it. Likes to act. You try things, you plunge in. Let's just get going. We're building the plane, flying at the same time. Is that how you approach a new project or group work? Or maybe you approach it as caring. You want to know that everyone's feelings have been taken into consideration and that their voices have been heard before acting, before moving forward on a solution. That's south. East. specifying. So this is paying attention to detail. Likes to know the who, what, when, where, and why before acting. Does that sound like you? What about speculating? West, our fourth compass point. You like to look at the big picture and all the possibilities before acting. You like to think conceptually, big picture. You know, if we do this, then that. What does that mean to? What's that going to lead to? Okay, so we're modifying on the fly a little bit. Unfortunately, we don't have time for breakout rooms. So Tracy, great way to take the lead. If folks would like to share which compass point resonated with you in the chat, please do. And then think about answering these questions. These are questions that you can jot down a few lines about. You know, some of them are very prescriptive. But now that you have your compass point, think about answering those questions. And so as an aside for our train the trainers in the room, if you'd like to do this session on your own, this is an opportunity where each of the compass points are grouping up and discussing these answers to share out with the group. And there's always some great insights in the group sharing piece. And so while I'm remiss we can't do that here today together, as I would love to hear some of your thoughts and ideas on this, I want to give you the tool to be able to take it back to your respective work areas to maybe do this with your team and start to understand, how do me and my colleagues approach group work, approach collaboration? So a couple takeaways from this. There's, of course, no style is better than any one. That's the thing I'll say again, no style is better than any other. And ultimately, most often when we're doing this, and some of you probably thought this, saying, Jason, what if I'm like between north and south, or between north and east? I'm a northeast. Yeah, totally makes sense. And I would have told you at that point, choose one for this activity that comes to mind first. But in the takeaway, you were probably not just one style all of the time in every situation. And more on that momentarily. And our second biggest takeaway, this is the real aha moment. This is the kind of unspoken, but we will speak it. The most successful teams have a combination of styles. When we bring diverse thoughts and approaches to a team, those are the most successful teams. And so often when I'm doing this in person, there are two things that almost inevitably happen when I'll ask the groups to share out. What inevitably happens is, you can imagine, number one, which group wants to go first? When there's that quiet of, I say, which group would like to share first? It's our north, it's our acting, the people who just want to jump in and do it. Almost without fail, that group will share their answers to the room first. And not surprisingly, on the flip side of that coin, one thing that holds true almost every time I do this is that the folks with the south compass point, the caring folks, will go last. And that is super important, super valuable. That is often people will say in the room, I have so much difficulty working with the caring people, trying to make sure everyone's voices are bringing them along. But in all that we've been doing here and talking about empathy and talking about excellent leadership, maybe the leaders go last. Maybe the most excellent leaders go last. What the caring folks are doing in this activity, when I see it live, they are making sure everyone else's voice is heard before they step in and share their piece. Pretty powerful insight. So think about using this, the Compass Points activity, cross-team project meeting, help onboarding new staffs or employees. Could be useful. And for those of you who said, Jason, but I'm more than one, I'm kind of in between. We got a solution for you. The DISC assessment. This is a great compliment that, hey, look at that. Literally shows you in the corners. But this is another excellent tool. We use this often with our career management teams in helping students, again, telling their stories, understanding how they approach work. The DISC assessment is a career readiness tool. You can find it online. I am not sure if there's a paywall behind it, but it's an assessment, again, you can take that'll a little more in depth than the compass points, give you some insight into this. All right, so we're on our last part. I'm just going to give you a few tools out the door, give some time for Q&A, and then get you on to your next session, which is, I'm kind of excited that this is where we started the day, and that you're about to go interact with other folks. There's going to be times that you'll probably be in breakout rooms or sharing or, hearing other presenters. And you can start doing some of that plasticity work. You're going to have moments to be self-aware, to start thinking about, what am I learning? What's triggering me? How am I socially entering the space? How am I interacting with others that, largely in this case, probably haven't met or interacted with before. So think about that going forward in the day. You can actually improve your EQ before the day's done. All right, so emotional intelligence 2.0. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of getting where you are with your EQ. So this EQ book, I don't know if you can see what I've done kind of on the side, but this little section here, this is kind of what we've been doing today. The background, the platform, the diving off. And then the rest of this here are strategies. These are all implementable practical strategies to use. The EQ book comes with the assessment code in the back. So take the assessment, it's going to give you some suggested strategies, and then you can start to branch outward. What's really cool about the assessment is that you get to do it twice. So you get to measure it once, see where you are. It's going to give you a number between 0 and 100. Get the academic brain out of your head. There's no letter grade with your emotional intelligence. It's just a number to measure. And that's going to give you a number to start with. Work on some of the strategies, some of the suggestions the assessment gives you. And then you can check back in 6 months or a year later and you can see where you're at. You can see what's been working, what's improved. Because ultimately EQ, emotional intelligence, working on these strategies, it's an ongoing journey. It's not a destination. Once you hit 100 on the assessment in all domain areas, which I don't think that happens, I don't know if that does, there is still something to learn and grow with. Because there's a key point in what I said earlier in that self-awareness piece about our values, that to be the best congruent leaders we can be, our values should not change between situations at a given time. However, over time, our values may very well change. A very simple explanation or example of this is parenthood. The things you maybe value before and after becoming a parent may very well change. And so over time, our values may change. So there's always continual work to be done about understanding our triggers, understanding how we manage our emotions. Across the board, emotional intelligence, increasing and improving it is going to require you to understand it's progressive. Self-awareness comes first. The hard part about being uncomfortable is being okay with feedback. Being in looking at that Johari window, where are those hidden areas? Where can we find knowledge of our mistakes? This is a simple everyday practice. It's consistent. That's the consistency, showing up every day in small ways, leaning into that discomfort. That's how we know we're learning when it feels a little uncomfortable. And some sort of reminder system. EQ helps leaders be one step ahead. When it comes to your team, there are many places where a leader can be proactive rather than reactive. The simplest piece of this, the simplest leadership development tool I can give you as a place to start here today, I tell all of my students the very first day I meet them, DWYSYWD. That's your advice. Do what you say you will do. As a leader, the best place to start being congruent with your actions and your language, do what you say you will do. 3 silver bullets for EQ correlates back to that graph we saw with our student leaders. Get your stress under control. Get your sleep hygiene under control. Get your caffeine intake under control. Sorry to thoroughly piss you off, but this is what it looks like. We got to get our stress down through it's kind of an optimal bell curve. Some stress is good, but too much stress is bad. So we generally hear breathing exercises, yoga, using techniques to work on our stress. Sleep hygiene, when we're awake, toxic brain proteins are building up. So we want to look at unassisted falling asleep, getting those 8 hours, those new blue light before bed, things we're getting more conscious of hearing beforehand. And then caffeine. Caffeine actually has a 6-hour half-life. So it takes 24 hours to leave your system. Ideally, to get the best quality night's sleep you can, no caffeine after 12 p.m. These are all silver bullets that affect your emotional intelligence, no matter where you are in your practice. And those are all things, as we saw with students, can affect your performance, can affect how you show up. So even not taking the assessment, great silver bullets. 2 more slides, and then we're going to ask a couple questions. Why does EQ matter to leaders? Bringing it back around to the NOW conference. It's going to improve your decision-making and well-being. It's ultimately going to help you strengthen, create, transform organizational culture. That's a lot of the work I do as a consultant. That's a lot of me referencing this book, looking for strategies of how to meet others where they are in various given situations. And ultimately, we want to build resilient leaders in organizations. And if none of that's okay, maybe works for dating too. Networking plus, those awkward interpersonal moments. Practicing good EQ can help us out of those. This is the 4 agreements. This is a book that I think in other language really helps sum up what excellent EQ practices look like. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Always do your best. I leave you with that as a general sentiment and thought. This is a book you can also check out from the library. And a final takeaway from teaching EQ and consulting work that I have had so far. Emotional intelligence is about building a bridge to meet people where they are. In new situations, it's not about changing your beliefs or authenticity to accomplish a shared goal. Rather, it's about being present. To understand what you need to bring to a situation and what people counting on you need, it's about being present. So thank you for being here. When I told you earlier that I was checking my watch in that example of active listening, this is actually a reminder. It's a bracelet that says the word here. It was given to me by students that I taught leadership courses to. No time like the present. This is my reminder when I check the time to be present, to be here. So get up, get going, keep moving forward one step at a time. Wish you all the best of luck. Here's where you can find me following this up. And please, if you have a few questions, we do have just a couple minutes here. I'm happy to field them and answer them for you.
We do have a few questions that were placed in the chat, but before you all leave and before we open questions, I just want to let you know I dropped the link for the evaluation in the chat. So please, please, please complete the evaluation. Yes, and the QR code is on the screen. So please, please, please feel free to scan that as well. One question we had was regarding IQ. Did you have a chance to see that, Jason?
I don't think I did.
Yeah, so regard to IQ, I've understood that we often have a higher IQ as we age. I've understood that this is due to life experiences plus what we learn along the way. On the other hand, I've been IQ tested 3 times as an adult due to severe learning disabilities. Yes, some areas seem greatly improved, but it was seen that my overall IQ had actually lowered by the 3rd IQ test in my late 40s. That was before the COVID lockdown, so I cannot blame COVID brain fog either. So that was a comment there. So any comments about, does our IQ, is it higher as we age?
Yeah, great question. That is not an area I dive too deeply into, but in much like EQ, there are absolutely internal and external factors that are always affecting and rearranging our neuroplasticity. So I would conjecture that, yeah, there are effects on our IQ. I have not seen kind of any themes or kind of line of best fit, but I think there's something there. And that's all I would say at this point. Definitely something to look more into. So I'll do a little searching. Thanks for that question.
No problem. So we had one other question, but I think it was answered. It was the tool for strength finding, and someone added the link in the chat. And I'm not sure if there are any questions anyone else would like to ask, but the floor is open.
And of course, too, my contact information is up here. So if you don't have a question now, but maybe, do the assessment or, look at one of the slides later on down the line and want to follow up, please do. I'm happy to answer questions. This is, kind of a passion project, an area for me that I get to do professionally, but also really care about because I see the positive effects. So let's continue the conversation. You being here is that open invitation for me to say, let's keep this going. Let's see how we can support each other and working on developing excellent EQ. Thank you all so much for the appreciation in the chat. And it does mean a lot. Definitely goes a long way. So I'm thankful for that.
So if there are no other questions, you can feel free to hang out and chat with Jason, or you can transition to our next session, which entails a little fun activity. I think it's the, I will say, let me pull it up. It is the energizing drink demo with Deepak. So feel free to join us in the main session and get your blood flowing again with this energizing drink demo. Or feel free, stretch, get a snack, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. Thank you so much, Jason, for all the great information. And I'm looking forward to applying everything that you shared today. And I definitely will follow up with you myself on honing my emotional intelligence, right? Developing that.
Yes, a shout out, of course, to our wonderful moderator and tech team behind the scenes. Couldn't do it without you. It takes a team.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And please, please, please complete the evaluation that I am going to place again in the chat. Thank you so much. And please remember to download the slides. Jason has lots of information in there. Bye, everyone.